Hey everyone, welcome to Across the Pond, where we talk about insights and strategies for B2B marketers. I'm Adam Hutchinson, I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Medium, and I'm joined as always with Josh. Josh, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Adam. My name is Josh Sykes-Abreu. I'm the Director of Marketing Operations here at Medium Marketing.
Great. And what are we talking about today, Josh?
Today, we are going to be discussing AI in search. So, we're going to be taking a look at the different ways that AI has impacted the search journey, both for users and for marketers on the other end as well. And we're hopefully going to have some, really deep and insightful conversations around what should people be caring about, why should they be caring about it, and ultimately, what can marketers do now that the robot AI has stolen all of your search traffic? So definitely some interesting stuff to go in. Should we jump straight in, Adam?
Yeah, definitely. No small topic to cover today. But
No,
let's maybe let's start with a little bit of history. How about that?
please, yeah.
So if we think about search as a channel, traditionally in B2B marketing, it was a high intent channel, right? And
Yeah.
whether we're talking about top of funnel intent or bottom of funnel intent, it was very clear intent, right? Someone was actively searching for, I need to know this piece of information. I have this question. I'm trying to find this solution. And so those keywords were obviously something that could be very easily be captured as a marketer, and we can drive that traffic to our website. So it became an inbound channel. And in fact, search actually is the genesis of inbound marketing and how we think about it today. It's a form of great, all of this intent is out there. Here's how you can go capture it through SEO to turn that into traffic to your website. And of course, ultimately conversions and leads. So, as marketers, we started to equate search traffic and search queries with potential leads, right? And
Yeah.
clicks. So those became equivalencies. And you could look at other channels like social and other things as brand awareness, but search was very much your traffic driving channel. The problem is that's not really true anymore. Now, it's not that that intent has gone away, right? Folks are still searching for things. They still need to know things. They're still asking questions, but their way of consuming that information is no longer clicking through on a search result to a website. Instead, they're consuming information directly on the search itself and in other channels. So this has sort of created this rise of what we call zero click searches, a search that's not resulting in a click to a website. So Josh, tell us a little bit more about that trend. Like what is zero click search?
So zero click search, as the name suggests, is a search query that doesn't result in a click through from Google to another website. Now, it's become a bit of a buzz trend word over the past couple of years, especially amongst marketers that are starting to see their traffic decline. But this sort of trend towards non-click searches has been around for quite some time. We've actually seen that around 70% of organic searches on Google right now result in zero clicks. Now, some of those zero clicks are going to be because they're staying within the Google ecosystem. So click throughs to YouTube, Maps, business directions, and things like that. Those all constitute zero click for marketers. But this hasn't been, it's not a massive jump. We saw in 2020 that was at about 65%. So it's only gone up about 5% over the last 5 years there. Now, why this has started to rise a little bit more and why we're starting to see it become a bit more of a concern for marketers is because of these AI summaries that have started to come in. I think it's really sort of triggered an inspiration moment for a lot of marketers where they're now visually able to see like this thing is what's taking my search traffic. Is it true? Not necessarily, as we said, some of that search traffic has not been around for quite a while now, but it definitely helps to have a boogeyman to point out and go, here's where my search traffic is going. The AI summaries, they're very helpful in summarizing information and in sort of getting across answers to some of the slightly more complex queries without having to go off to another site. So you see this, I'm sure you've seen this yourself, Adam. I'm sure everyone listening has seen this. If you were to put in a query into Google around, what is the best channel for activating a cold audience, you'll probably get from Google a sort of 3 to 4 paragraph summary listing out some options for the person there. And for a lot of people, that's all they need from their initial intent search. They may then go on to look at other sites. They might go on to LinkedIn. They might even click some of those sort of links that are generated from those searches.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, that's where their information comes from. And with that, we just lose the opportunity to get a click through to a site that we may previously have got.
Yeah,
Now,
exactly.
and I think these these are sort of AI summaries are becoming more and more, for want of a better word, useful. I think we've seen some pretty pretty bad ones to start off beforehand, but they are becoming better and better. So people are more and more likely to get the information they need there. And they're also then migrating off of Google to other platforms as well. So we're seeing that they might carry out that initial sort of search query on Google, move over to a LinkedIn, move over to a YouTube or something like that. A really important thing, and I think this is something a lot of marketers need to be aware of, is that this zero click is really sort of taking away a lot of traffic in informational queries. So this is your blogs, your guides, your how-tos, and things like that. A lot of that is what was being used as that initial sort of piece of content that marketers were putting out there that was attached to their Google search keywords and things like that. So you might bid on, say, digital shelf, and you put your digital shelf blog, your digital shelf white paper at the top of that bid. That's what you'd be pointing people through to. Given AI's ability to sort of amalgamate a lot of different information and turn it into a single output, some of those longer form pieces, some of those more informational queries, that's where the search traffic is disappearing from. And it's really starting to align with some of these sort of new ways of buyer journeys. Do you want to sort of talk to some of those new buyer journeys we're seeing and how that's impacted by AI?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been seeing for a while now, it's no surprise that buying journeys are becoming more self-serve, they're becoming longer, right? I think those are trends that we've talked about as marketers for a while, but where this is ultimately leading to is a lot of the buying journey now is actually more about trust. It's about advocacy from peers. It's peer-to-peer driven in the way that we think about and look for solutions and talk with our peers about what we're seeing in the industry. That's really where the buying journey is happening right now. And so what was interesting to me is we look at where does AI search come in the midst of all of that, right? And there's a couple interesting stats here that I think are really telling. So the first one was that 70% of people have tried AI search. So a lot of people have tried AI search.
Yeah.
Only 14% of them are using it daily. Okay. So has AI search become the default mode of searching for something? No, not yet. Now, I think that number will probably grow. But the second stat here is, I think, really telling, which is that of the people that are using AI search, 68% of users are using AI to research and summarize information, and they're doing it with aggregate searches. So instead of, a pointed question that I'm going to go search for and try to get one answer to, a
Mm.
lot of folks are using AI search at this point to say, gather 10 different sources for me and give me a summary across them, right? Or go find five different options about this topic or five different providers that I might want to look into for this solution, right? Or give me
With
10 different articles. Yeah.
like deep research as well coming into play, I'm assuming that's definitely causing a growth there as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And I know a lot of folks are able to actually get deeper insights a lot faster than they could currently by just trying to go point by point, right, through different solution providers or how to blog posts or
Yeah.
something, right? And so it makes sense that that's kind of how AI is being used at this point. And so that's not necessarily a bad thing, but what we have to understand as solution providers, as marketers in the space, is that um, we're not controlling a single narrative, and in fact our users aren't actually just seeing a single narrative, they're seeing a summary of multiple narratives getting presented to them. And so, how do we make sure we're showing up in that environment where things are getting collated together in a lot of different places? And so, I think that kind of leads us to this idea of channel diversification, right? Because this information is getting pulled from a lot of different areas. So, Josh, talk to us about how is channel diversification actually impacting where some of that legacy kind of search traffic, intent traffic has gone?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we're just looking statistically, organic traffic from that sort of traditional Google search, it might be declining, but if it's not declining, then the growth has slowed. So the amount of sort of searches that are taking place, the volume just isn't there where it was. And Gartner is predicting that there's about a 25% decline in traditional search traffic in the near future. So to your point, you know, people are people are moving elsewhere. At the end of the day, search intent, the whole concept of needing to find information, that's not disappearing from people's needs until we get those Elon Musk little plugins at the back of our head where we can just instantly get information beamed to us. You're still going to have to look for information somewhere. And as you pointed out, we're seeing it come from just new places or more places than before. So LinkedIn, YouTube, and there's a couple of other platforms we call out. Those are becoming increasingly the sort of start point for a lot of user journeys. At the moment, LinkedIn's accounting for about 50% of all social traffic to B2B websites. So it's a sort of very key place that people are then jumping from to your website. And if we're talking around sort of YouTube, about 70% of B2B buyers now say they watch YouTube as part of their path to purchase. And that one in particular, that one's been a huge shift. So we've seen, I think the stat I read was a 52% jump of people saying that they use it as part of their path to purchase in the past couple of years. So that is a huge shift of search of intent over to the channel of YouTube. And to be honest, I think it's probably a little bit underutilized right now. I know that we hopefully are currently being watched on YouTube by a number of our viewers, but it's certainly not the area that a lot of B2B companies are putting their content out on. And it sounds like that could be the direction that a lot of the buyers are going to. Now, we've seen this before, video content has always been quite important, and it doesn't have to always be on YouTube. 95% of B2B buyers are saying that the video content is important in deciding to move forward with a purchase. But the reason why YouTube as a sort of platform is particularly useful is because of the fact that it's part of the Google network. So hopefully not getting shut down by big Google here, as some of you may not be aware, Google wants you to stay in its ecosystem. Google wants you to click on Google-based products, Google-based websites. They don't want you going elsewhere. So their search algorithm is going to prioritize YouTube. It's going to prioritize maps and things like that. So if you've got your content on another Google platform like YouTube, that might be what gets prioritized when someone makes that initial search, And again, if we're pulling in AI integrations and things like that, if they're able to sort of look at some of the comments on YouTube, if they're able to connect it up to a particular brand, particular base and things like that, it adds that authenticity. It gives people another sort of opportunity to connect with you. Now, as we said, there's a lot of different reasons people are diversifying channels. And one of the things which, I think we're going to touch on later and have already touched on a little bit is this idea of people wanting to find information from trusted sources and wanting to be able to sort of like showcase that the people they're interacting with know what they're talking about. We're also seeing that on the Google side of things as well with the way that sort of traffic is diversifying. So one of my favorite stats that we came across whilst doing some research for this was that Reddit organic traffic has gone up by 603% since mid 2023, which is huge numbers, absolutely insane numbers. I think if our website traffic went up by 600% in like a year and a half, first of all, we'd be popping open the bubbly and having a weekend off, but
Exactly.
it is big. And similarly, Quora, which hopefully a lot of you guys are aware of, is that sort of I like to call it the slightly more professional Yahoo Answers, but is a sort of peer-to-peer question and answer platform. That's gone up by 379% since mid 2023. Now, a lot of this is coming from the way that Google's algorithm now works, which is prioritizing rich community sourced answers. But at the same time, it's also because people are sort of more willing to take peer reviewed, take advocacy from other sort of people within their networks and things like that. Without going too deep dark down the funnel, it also then brings into questions of things like how is dark social, how is word of mouth sort of being showcased on the search intent platforms and things like that. So there's a lot of, sort of places that people are going. I think channel diversification as a whole is going to be sort of a major strategy point that brands need to be thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sort of then begs the question, great, if that's the case, what kind of content do you need to be working on in order
Yeah.
to facilitate channel diversification, right? And I think that's where we see sort of this shift in the content schema, I guess, for brands is community led, right? It's
Mm.
am I creating content, one that's going to resonate with that community, right? That's step one. But actually, am I creating content with my community, right? Am I crowdsourcing content that can then be leveraged? Am I creating content that can be used by my community in places like a Quora or a Reddit, or that someone can share a YouTube video snippet on social, right? Are we thinking about that kind of path for how my audience is actually engaging with that content in a way that's not just a click through, right, to a website anymore? And look, you can still drive the clicks, right? Like paid search isn't going away. That's still going to be there. You
Yeah,
can certainly capture some of that share of voice where you need to. But if that's your only tactic, it's not going to work because that's a diminishing place of where Google is going. So we need to be thinking about content in a much more kind of holistic term, and a much more expertise driven, a lot more differentiated, and a lot more focused on that actual end result of how people are going to be sharing or engaging with this content itself, right? Creating that engagement becomes more important than just the content topic itself. So we could go down a whole rabbit trail with content. And maybe that's a part two of this, Josh, that we can follow
yeah, I
up
think that'd
on.
be
But
interesting.
maybe there's some tactical things though when we think about the AI aspect of this itself and AI search. Do we have any kind of tactical advice for folks right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the number one sort of piece of advice I'd give is to go away and take a look into the Google's EEAT policy, which is their experience, expertise, authoritativeness, which I can never say, so apologies, and trust. And that is a framework that Google is now using as part of their algorithms to highlight what they see to be good, powerful content that their users want to engage with. So just understanding that concept of experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trust, putting that in your alignment on how you're producing content, that's going to go a long way to some of those slightly more qualitative background algorithm questions. There is a few things you can do on the front end, some of the more sort of like traditional SEO approaches that are always going to be helpful for AI search. You mentioned it there, schema markup. So FAQs, product schema, having clear structures and headings and things like that, definitely going to help. It really helps the AIs who are scraping it to sort of denote whether something is important for a particular heading or subheading and things like that. And we've also seen that FAQ style or too long TLDR summaries and things like that at the tops of posts are really good at being pulled through into those AI summaries. That sort of like, hey, here's a quick 5 bullet points on what you're going to get out of this piece of content. Those exact 5 bullet points might be what ends up on ChatGPT that you're being linked back to. There's obviously going to be things like semantic SEO, HTML content, page load speeds, and all of those sorts of things that definitely need to be taken into account. But as long as you're aligning some of your sort of like base level, does my page work and is it AI friendly, which you can find sort of hints and tips about all over the place. And then looking at that, okay, how do I get across that what I'm talking about is, coming from a place of expertise, coming from a place of authority. That's what's going to help you win on those AI search. That's what's going to get you in those AI search results, those Google search generated results and things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here, Josh.
Oh,
Okay.
please.
Yeah, so I'm going to put my CMO hat on for a minute, right? And we just spent this whole conversation talking about how, yeah, you're not really going to be getting clicks anymore. You're not really going to be getting traffic to your website. You're not going to get direct leads from search anymore. So am I just out of luck? Do I have to go back to the board and say, yeah, we're not really going to get that anymore? Or am I still getting clicks and traffic? It just looks different.
Yeah, I mean, 100% clicks and traffic is still something to track, but you're going to have to widen it out a little bit and figure out a way to track your clicks, traffic, and those sorts of metrics just across your entire channel basis.
Okay.
So that might mean that rather than looking at, this is how many Google search clicks we got this month, it can just be this is how many clicks we got to any of our platforms. This is how many LinkedIn viewer profiles we got. This is how many YouTube clicks we got on our content and things like that. And that becomes your click metric. Same with your traffic. It's anywhere you are getting looked at across the entire web, that's your traffic. It's not just to your website. And then you can take a sort of deeper level in there as well and start to look at some of those quality metrics that might denote, hey, maybe we haven't got as much traffic, but the traffic we are getting is from the right people. And that looks, I think, a little bit like time on site, scroll depth. You can look at things like comments and shares on social. You can even take a look at your bounce rate. Hopefully, that's going to go down if the right people are on your site and things like that. And you start to pull some of those maybe lesser used metrics, and you can paint yourself a picture of, hey, maybe my organic traffic's gone down. Maybe I'm not getting as many people on the site as I did before, but I'm getting just as many or more people on LinkedIn. And the people that I am getting to the site, they're spending longer on it. They're taking in more of our content and we're creating more of a connection with them. And that's going to showcase that actually your sort of traffic plan, your content plan, that's it's yielding the right results. And hopefully, maybe a little bit longer term, you're going to see some of those demos come in. You're going to see some of those warm conversations start because you are starting to get in on that.
Yeah. And I mean, we can still measure share of voice too, right? Which is an important
Yeah,
part of the metric. And that share of voice might look different, right? It might not just be per keyword, how often am I showing up, but it also might be per ChatGPT query, right? Am
yeah,
I that result, et cetera. And because I think it's important to note that the funnel hasn't gone anywhere, right? There's
no,
still a need to reach that audience, right? A significant portion of your audience at that top of the funnel. There's still a need to get engagement from that audience in that middle of the funnel. And then obviously you still need to convert those into leads, pipeline revenue, right at the bottom of the funnel. All of that's still true. What's changing here is we're saying search, like other channels, by the way, just doesn't have as direct of a through line as it used to anymore. So I don't get as much of the direct attribution as I used to. That's always been true for other channels like social, right?
yeah,
That's always been true for things like video. And so we just, as marketers, we have to get comfortable with that fact to know that I still need the same numbers, right? I still need to reach the same audience. I still need to engage that same audience. I still need to see the traffic and see the conversions. But I might take a little bit more of a correlative approach to say, I'm doing these activities to go optimize search and AI search, and I intend to see these results over the course of the quarter or the next couple of quarters, and we can actually measure it that way for my total impact on pipeline. Any other closing thoughts, Josh?
I think we can take it back to the sort of thing that you opened with, Adam, which is ultimately the reason why search was maybe an easier platform was because it was that direct intent platform. And that's why marketers like to sort of hang a lot of their weight on the clicks going through to their demo requests and things like that. It's just not the reality anymore, unfortunately. So, like you said, you're going to have to get used to maybe taking a slightly different approach and maybe having to update your reporting a little bit to be slightly more qualitative, slightly more complex. But it's, the buyer is what's important in all of this. And they have been moving towards this sort of slightly more information driven, slightly more sort of quality of information driven approach for years. Hopefully it isn't news to everyone that your content needs to be authoritative, if I could ever learn to say that, and it needs to be coming from a place of expertise. We're now just really starting to see the impact of that on buyer journeys. But the sort of reasoning behind it, that's been there for years now.
I think by the time Josh learns how to pronounce authoritative, Google will have moved on to something else. We'll be post AI search.
We'll
Uh,
have a whole new word for me to learn how to say.
exactly. No, this was great, Josh. Really appreciate your thoughts on this. I think it's
Yeah, you
definitely
too.
warrants kind of a deeper dive, maybe on the next video. But
Yeah.
thanks everyone for joining us across the pond.